This is a lecture from Open Tuition. For the free lecture notes that go with this podcast, please visit opentuition.com.
Chapter 17 deals with performance and appraisal interviews. It's almost universal that when people are in employment, that usually every year there is some form of appraisal interview. And indeed for some people it is the highlight of their year, where they're able to discuss with their boss how they've been doing, perhaps what they would like to do. Sometimes it gives them an opportunity of effectively making complaints to their boss as well, within the context of the appraisal interview. The purpose is really twofold. First of all, to improve organizational performance. What we're trying to do with employees is to try to get them to behave and perform in a way which is suitable and good for the organization. So, for example, if you are in some sort of hospitality situation, you're in a hotel or a restaurant, and maybe on the feedback forms you have been getting feedback to the effect that staff seem to be a little indifferent, a little bit unfriendly. This is obviously going to affect organizational performance in a bad way. And unless you tell people about that, unless you manage to praise people, criticize them, and of course give them help to improve, then the organization will not improve. People may not know to improve, they may not know how to improve. The second part of it is it will help to develop individuals. People who are recruited, people who are employed in an organization will not be fully formed, will not be at the maximum potential, generally speaking. And what we can do in performance appraisal, give them feedback about maybe where things went well, where things didn't go so well. Then we ask them maybe what they're interested in, ask them maybe what training they think they need and so on. Then you are helping to develop individuals into better employees, and it can be very motivational. Performance appraisal and training, it's giving this feedback, it's maybe giving recognition, esteem, and so on. You feel you are developing as an individual, which is almost kind of self-actualization, and so on. People don't like just being in an organization kind of floating around, so to speak, without any idea of whether they're good employees, bad employees, or whether they're kind of somewhere in the middle. If they're bad employees, they should be concerned, how can I become a better employee, because that will safeguard my employment. Sometimes said that there are three elements in an appraisal interview. It's very common in an appraisal interview for you to be told next year's salary, and if there's some form of performance-related pay, to be told maybe what your bonus is for last year. So it's very often a reward aspect. Secondly, it will tell you what your performance has been over the past period. It'll be giving you feedback and how you've done, and so on. And finally, there is information about what the organization has planned for you, your potential. So they might tell you that within about 12 months or so, you're going to be maybe promoted to a supervisor, and so on. A couple of things to say about this. So, first of all, some people, some human resources experts would say that the reward bit should be kept quite separate from the performance and potential part of that. And they say, they say it should be separate. Let me just there's a better line in here. They say it should be separate because it's all very well saying to somebody, look, you've done very, very well, But sometimes you can't give a reward which is commensurate with that. The sort of things which will determine pay can be performance, but it can be what can the business afford. It can be constrained by pay bands, and it can be what's the going rate. What could we go out and recruit somebody new for? And no matter how good somebody is, how fantastic their performance is, to keep upping and upping and upping and upping their salary, they'll price themselves out of a job. They become too expensive. And they say, well, it doesn't sit then too well if you say your performance is great, but no pay rise because we can't afford it this year. It kind of grates a little bit. And some HR experts say you should really keep this about 6 months away from the other bits of the appraisal year, so that you disconnect them in effect. Not that common, really, simply because it really means probably 2 meetings a year that your manager has to carry out. One meeting where you're told about your performance and your potential, another meeting where your pay rise and your bonus is explained to you. And most managers find that 2 of these appraisal interviews a year is one too many, really. Performance, how do we judge performance? The problem with it, of course, it can be very subjective, how well you've done on a job. You want to try to break it down into a number of different categories, perhaps. So some people might be appraised on their timekeeping. They might be appraised on how well they get on with customers, how well they get on with staff. They might be appraised on things like helpfulness and technical skills and so on. Again, within that, there is an element of subjectivity, but at least you are trying to break it down into headings, almost into competences, if you like. And you could create what's called a kind of competence framework. You're very good at technical stuff, but you're not very good maybe in getting on with clients. You're not very good at hitting deadlines, but you are very, very good at punctuality and so on. And you've got much better indications, much better pinpointed where you're doing fine and what aspects of your performance needs improvement. If you don't break it down like that, it's quite hard maybe to understand why your performance is regarded as slightly below par. The other thing about performance is we have to think who's going to judge your performance. And I suppose the typical way, or the classical way, was your boss or the manager is judging the subordinates. It's a kind of top-down appraisal system. Many organizations nowadays have what's called a 360-degree method of performance appraisal. Your manager appraises you, but you appraise your manager because the manager has to be appraised as a manager. How good they are at delegating, passing tasks to you, explaining and so on. You're often working with colleagues and your colleagues will appraise you as well. So the appraisals go up and down on a kind of a linearly or laterally as well. And it's 360-degree appraisal. Some organizations have quite complex systems in place where you can appraise people anonymously, because obviously there may be perceived a certain risk if you were to dare to criticize your manager. It might be better you might get nearer the truth if it was anonymous. So, performance, how we did well, how we didn't do so well, potential, what you might be doing in the next few years. So here's the steps to take place in the appraisal interviews. And these can be quite arduous for managers to do. It's not just kind of calling somebody in kind of semi-randomly and being able to give an appraisal interview to somebody. It needs careful preparation. For example, you need to see what was said last year. So if there was some area for improvement that was identified last year, we have to kind of remember that and see, has it actually been acted upon this year? So you have to go back to the old stuff. You have to look at the appraisals that you might be getting from colleagues and managers and other people they've worked with, maybe even some feedback from customers. That has to be all collated and so on. You have to think, where might this person be going in the next 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and so on for the potential. You might have to be thinking about what rate of pay they should be given, what bonus to give them, and so on. So the groundwork is substantial. And employees do resent it if they're brought into an appraisal interview and it is obvious that the manager hasn't done the homework. If the manager really doesn't know what tasks they've undertaken during the year, or maybe what qualifications they've got, you become very cynical. You think the interview has been done just because the personnel manager, the personnel guidebook manual says that you have to do appraisal interviews, but it's all a bit of a farce. You know, it's not really a real interview at all. Then you bring in the person, and there are various approaches that one can take to the interview. Again, it's kind of going from fairly dictatorial down to more participative. We have this here. The good, I suppose, just be tell. You just tell people that you're not very good at this and you're very good at that, which is probably not going to be very effective. Probably start at tell and sell. You would say, I think you're not very good at that because we had this feedback from one of the clients and so on there. But you're not really asking for much coming back from the employee. It's pretty much a one-way street in comments. And that's not great. The employee can feel resentful that you're not willing to listen to why maybe the performance was bad, or the employee might even disagree that performance was bad in a particular context. It may be misreported. The next one is tell and listen. So you tell somebody, well, you're not very good on technical skills, and then you listen to them and they say, well, I think I am, or I think I'm not very good on technical skills because I was ill for 3 weeks, and that's when you had the 2 weeks course on some technical aspect and so on. And there, or they might say, I know I'm not very good on technical skills, but I really find them very difficult. Maybe could I be moved to a role which doesn't require those particular technical skills, which I hate, and so on. So much more kind of participative there. And the final one is problem solving. It's not kind of telling people kind of what you think of them. It's rather more saying, well, how do you think you are on technical skills? And you develop a kind of dialogue here, and it's not a dialogue which is full of blame, saying you're not very good at this. It's kind of saying, if the employee says, well, I'm not very good on the technical aspects of the database and so on, and you say, okay, how can we make you better? It's not pointing the finger of blame when you should be good, or I'm going to keep your pay rise down because you're not very good. It is trying to solve the problem to improve performance. Because if you don't improve people's performance, then you probably have to recruit another person. And there's all sorts of risks you get the wrong one. They have to go through the training process again and so on. And it is not necessarily the best way to go. You have to be really certain that it's worth giving up on someone before you abandon this problem-solving technique. So then you plan basically what's going to happen. You plan that they are going to improve their technical skills, that they're going to go on a particular course, and so on. And so you have to gain commitment that this is a worthwhile, achievable objective for the person to be doing. We're really almost on smart territory again. It has to be very specific, measurable, agreed, relevant, time limited, and so on there. You agree it with the person. Sometimes you both jointly sign a document saying this is what I'm intending to do to improve over the next year. You summarize and make sure your employee understands what's in there. A report will be written. It will be put on the employee's personnel file. It will be probably given to the employee as well. So they have a permanent record they can look at during the forthcoming period of what's expected of them. And then we have to follow it up. For example, if you have agreed with somebody that they should go on a course, then that has to happen. Again, you fatally undermine appraisal interviews if you make lots and lots of promises, but then nothing comes of those promises. People again think, well, this is just play acting, really. And what you might do is agree to monitor progress. So you say, right, I will have another look at how you're doing in 3 months' time. We'll see if you're improving. We'll see if you need further help and so on. If important action is required, it is too long to leave it for a year before you give that person another steer, another bit of a little push perhaps in the right direction. Because if you leave it too long, you'll be hurting organizational effectiveness and you'll be putting this person's career at risk.